So, Emily, can you explain to us what is celiac disease?
So celiac is an autoimmune condition that affects an estimated 1 in 100 people worldwide. It's been well scientifically studied, and it's a very old condition. And what happens in the person is they're unable to produce an enzyme that breaks down the entire gluten molecule, which is actually a two-part molecule with glutenin and gliadin. And what happens is, especially with the gliadin, is it starts going through the system, and in a normal body, the enzyme would break the gliadin, and then the body would just start passing it through and breaking it down further. But in the case of celiac, this molecule passes a certain point in the small intestine and it's unbroken. And so the body says, uh-oh, what is this? And it looks like it's a foreign particle. So then the body launches a big immune response, and it involves inflammation and the production of certain molecules that wage war on this and try to defend the body from what that is. And it creates a lot of stress in the system, and over time, as you eat more and more gluten, when you have celiac, you create a lot of destruction in the digestive system because this inflammation just keeps happening. And then, of course, then little holes start to form in the intestine. The villi start to become flattened. So all of the surface area that digests or that absorbs food and nutrients gets destroyed. And that's basically what happens. And then it starts to affect your large intestine. It starts to affect other systems in the body because your digestive system is so key to how the other systems form and function. So it's really, it's quite a destructive condition when you don't know about it.
How did you get diagnosed with celiac disease?
For me, in a way, it was easier and harder because not everybody is symptomatic in exactly the same way. For me, when I was in my early teens, I started to have a lot of symptoms in my digestive tract that were very difficult to live with. So I had a lot of bloating and a lot of cramping, and I would even pass out. I remember I'd pass out, and it usually passing out just means you lose consciousness. I'd lose consciousness, and usually it was after a big bowl of Wheaties. And it really was correlated directly to like a large dose of wheat. But I never could make that connection with wheat because it really wasn't something well known in the United States. But it got to the point where, because it's autoimmune, the more stress from external circumstances that play on you, the more severe these symptoms got. So once I got to college and started a really rigorous nursing school routine, then I became almost anorexic because it became so painful to eat that I couldn't even sit in a lecture. So I just stopped eating. And then my family thought I had an eating disorder, and there were lots of going around, and I didn't know if I had an eating disorder because I didn't, whenever I would talk of pain in my digestive system, they thought I was exaggerating. So there was this whole merry-go-round of things. But then, to answer your question with the context, I visited an acupuncturist who was also a medical doctor in Madison, Wisconsin, and he was a Chinese man. And I had read so much information about my condition because I just couldn't believe that muscle relaxants or other things were going to help me. I felt like something much deeper was happening. And when I went to this man, he said, maybe you should stop eating bread and start eating sweet potatoes and potatoes. And the way he looked at me, and I just thought, oh, I remember reading something about wheat. So then I had tried so many things to that point to eliminate meat, milk, everything, that when I started to eliminate wheat, and I did it religiously, then within a month I started to experience, finally, after over a decade of pain every single day, relief of that pain. And then fast forward about 5 to 7 years, I can't remember exactly how many years later, I was in New York, and I decided to go to a gastroenterologist because I had just watched one of my dear friends die of colon cancer. And I went to the gastroenterologist to get a formal diagnosis. And he said, let's get a genetic test. And we did, and it was positive for the conditions that underlie it.
Wow, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And so it didn't get, diagnosis did not appear before a very long time. The thing I remember with my mom, she suffered from the condition for 30 years until finally they got, they diagnosed her. So can you tell me or tell us what's the difference between an allergy to gluten and celiac disease?
Mm-hmm. Well, a gluten allergy, which is quite common as well, documented as common as well, can result in a lot of different similar responses as to other food allergies. So you can have swelling, maybe swelling in the throat, or rashes on the skin, or it's a direct immune response that kind of signals that something is off. But the difference is that the whole immune system doesn't launch these antibodies and these things inside of the digestive system that cause such a level of destruction as celiac. But you still have this immune response. So you're still actually compromising the immune system. And it's really important, no matter what your condition is related to gluten, to be really aware of the fact that you have it, so that you understand that in both situations, you're really compromising your immune system and your health. In celiac, it's just a little bit more severe each time, and you're really doing a lot of tissue damage, and you're compromising the whole digestive system and other systems. And you're also triggering this autoimmune response, which also can lead to other related autoimmune conditions. So it's still a condition to be aware of. It's just maybe not as quote unquote severe.
The way, the argument that I use with my clients or my patients is to say that when it's an allergy, it generates inflammation, because it does, but it's an inflammation that is slow. It's not as powerful as with celiac. But celiac, so if you have an allergy, maybe you can have a tolerance to a little bit. If you eat something that is cross-contaminated, you may not have a reaction if the level of contamination is very low. But if you have celiac, even a finite part of gluten will trigger that reaction, regardless if you feel it or not. And that's where I draw the line. It's just that you can get by with a bit of gluten if you have an allergy, if you're under that tolerance, but you won't get by if you have celiac. So that's why it's very important to, if you have an allergy to gluten, a sensitivity to it, to get tested to define whether or not you have celiac, because the way you approach gluten is a bit different.
It is. I mean, it's kind of like the difference between getting a traffic ticket or, the country launching a full-out defense response, calling out the the National Guard and bringing them in. It's really like,
absolutely,
one's a lot more intense than the other. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you manage the condition from the get-go? When you got diagnosed, what changed? In which way your life changed?
So for me, again, it was easier and harder, but I focus on the easier part. It was a lot easier for me because if I ate anything wheat related after I had cut it out, my body immediately let me know with a response that was pain, discomfort, just a place I didn't want to go back to. So it was a lot easier for me to be very religious and strict about cutting out everything that contained gluten. And I became really quickly, because I had this like almost Pavlov's dog, like you get a shock or you get something, I had this really immediate psychological trigger of pain that I didn't want to go near. So it was really easy for me to find out, oh, this is in yogurt, this is modified food starch, this is this and this. And so I immediately started to filter everything that I was eating and stay really conservative and start to figure it out. Now it's very intuitive for me, going shopping. It's very obvious what has wheat, what doesn't. And I know what to buy and what not, because it's been years now. And it was such an amazing revelation to live without pain. It was like really having a new life. So of course, I wanted to keep that going, and it took years to rebuild my strength. It took years to rebuild my immune system. It took years to rebuild my digestive system so that it wasn't sensitive to everything, because it was sensitive to other things too. So many other things, like things containing a lot of fiber, anything, because it was just such a damaged digestive system. So it just took years of experimenting with, well, can I eat beans now? Can I eat this now? But also just keeping food very high nutritional value. So it's like, if you eat a piece of white bread, you've got a caloric content, but you don't really have a lot of nutritional value. So I was really focusing on foods that when I ate them, there was a density of nutrition, because it was so hard for my body to take anything in anyway.
Yeah. That's also a byproduct of the condition is malnutrition, because the nutrients don't get absorbed because of the villi being flattened, like you said. And that's a condition that is quite serious. And we have gluten in everything right now, so it's a bit difficult. I had a client not long ago. She had been diagnosed with a celiac with an endoscopy, and even though she believed she had removed gluten from everything in the diet, she was still feeling very bad. And therefore, she decided on her own that she didn't have celiac, even though she was positive. And it didn't make any difference in her life or in her pain. But the thing is that people don't understand that gluten is in everything. It can be in wine, in cold cut, in spice, in so many different things. It's not just buying products that does not say gluten, because there's so many words to be used, to describe gluten. And sometimes it can be included in a food, but under a certain level. So it's not mandatory for them to put it on the label. But if you're very sensitive to it, you're going to react to it. So I think there's still a lot of misconception or misunderstanding about the condition, and people don't really fully understand the extent of the seriousness. On the bright side, it's, I believe, the only autoimmune disease that we can revert. Because once we remove completely 100% gluten, we can, the leaky gut can close, the digestive system can heal, and we can revert completely that disease. It's one of the only one that we can do that. We can reduce symptoms with other autoimmune disease, but not reverting the condition like with celiac. So it's still a good news. To know that you can revert it based on the change of diet, it's quite amazing.
Yeah, because if I talk to people with Crohn's and things like that, I just feel very fortunate, because I can really be proactive about this, and I can really take hold of my health, and I can really make decisions in one way or another. And it's really, it's important for people who are not as symptomatic to also make those decisions. Do I want to feel better? Do I want to do these things that make me it's a change in your psychology. You really have to make a commitment to yourself and your life, and take responsibility, and realize that you are responsible.
Yes.
And I think everyone is, but I think a lot of people who, and again, is it fortunate or unfortunate? Because to me, I almost think I'm fortunate to have this condition, because it woke me up in a very early time in my life to the fact that I was responsible. But some people don't wake up until they're 50, 60, 70 years old. And then they're so headlong into a series of diseases that they never really realized that all along everything that they ate mattered.
Yeah. And you still have doctors who pretend that food has nothing to do.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That doesn't help, because and especially people, when you touch their food, it's quite difficult. It's a very difficult change. A diet change is very, very difficult. Even it's already difficult when you want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're getting sick and we remove everything that you're actually addicted to, because usually that's the very food that you love to eat. Well, it's quite difficult, and it's a challenge. That's very true. So. What do you recommend people to do once they first get diagnosed? Is there like a step-by-step process that you came up with, or tips that you could give them to make it easier?
I think mentally, it's just important to make that commitment to yourself that, okay, this is how I'm going to eat now. And in social situations, it's important to stand behind yourself, and be your own advocate. And it's not necessarily going to be as difficult as you anticipate to say, no, I actually can't eat that. Or to let people who are close to you and with you on a daily basis and in more informal settings know, I actually can't eat this now. This is, maybe even provide them with some literature. This is the condition that I have. And, if people don't understand or continue to try to push you into eating that food, then you don't have to do anything, just don't eat it. I think the reason I'm focusing on the social is because I think that will be the hardest hurdle for people to get over. And also just the mental block that this is something I love to eat and now I have to give it up. Because, okay, I'm going to be frank, they're not the most healthy foods, but there are a lot of gluten-free options out there. And a lot of them I think are not as nutritionally dense, and we already covered that as some other foods. But sometimes, yes, you just want to try a croissant. And I'm here in Switzerland, and in Bern, in the train station, they have a beautiful organic store, and they have a lot of gluten-free things, and they have gluten-free croissants. So if there's a point where I just want to have a croissant, I can have one. But it's not something I'm going to eat every day, because it's usually made with potato starch and tapioca, and there's now kind of a question about what are glutinous grains, and that's something that I recently worked with a healer in Bali to write an article about, like what other grains might be glutinous and produce a similar response in the body, or kind of gum up the body. And so I'm just really suggesting that you be very aware of what you're eating, be your own advocate. You don't have to be defensive with people, and you don't have to tell them your life story around it. You just, I actually can't eat that because I have, and most people today will understand. There are a lot of allergies out there. And I mean, we're living in a time where it's a lot easier than if we were in the 50s and said we couldn't eat some bread, and we have to just embrace the fact that we're in a time where we can say, I have a more modified diet, and there are plenty of things available. And explore, just type gluten-free recipe for this, that in Google, and you will find it. It's a really convenient time. You can find gluten-free vegan. Celebrate that you're living in this time, because even when I first discovered that I had it, the options were very limited, and the knowledge was very, people didn't know about it. But now we have advocates like Jennifer Esposito, who's a famous actress who has celiac, and she's got a really active Twitter feed about it. And, people who just kind of stand up and advocate for it, because it's not, right now there's this big diet trend about gluten-free, and I'm happy that it exists because it gives people options, but I don't want people to be under the illusion that it's just something people made up in their head, because some of us really do have a condition that it really compromises us to eat it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So just reframing things in your mind, but also it is an opportunity to become your own advocate and to realize I have to stand up for myself, and in a graceful way, and just say, I can't eat that,
But also that people better understand that now, because even in Spain, I was surprised when I came back from Mexico. Not every restaurant, but many restaurants, they offer gluten-free alternatives. And they are well aware of celiac, less aware of the gluten allergies. Because when I do believe, I don't know, because I didn't want to go back to gluten to find out, but normally my son and I, we are allergic to gluten and wheat, not to celiac. But every time we ask for something and it's gluten-free, like for example French fries, but we don't want the bread that goes with whatever, they tell us, the French fries may be contaminated because we cook something else in the same oil. So they're very well aware of the contamination issue with celiac. So my point is that if people are aware here in Spain, even more so in London or in cities around the States, so it's not as difficult as it used to be. My mom, for example, a few years ago, it was a nightmare for her to get anything gluten-free. Now, every store carries some sort of a gluten-free alternative, maybe not as much, and it's, to go back to what you were saying, it's, to me, I don't believe it's a good food because it's full of starch, sugar, and so forth. and chemicals, but it's a good transition food.
Yeah.
When you go from somebody who eats bread, pasta, all this kind of thing on a daily basis, well, that transition helps going to a healthy part. I mean, then we can transition to something else. It's also helpful with children. I say that.
Yeah.
So it's good that we have those alternatives, at least to begin with, But,
yeah. There's also kind of an adage in Ayurveda that I think is beautiful. One of the most beautiful principles of Ayurveda is the 80-20 rule, where you say, I know what I should be doing. I know how I should be eating. And once you discover that, it's just a real gift. But given society, given the way we live, given circumstances, you might find that you need a 20% buffer zone where you can just kind of cheat, and this and that, and you make your own decisions. If you feel like crap after you cheat, that's one thing, but at least, mentally it kind of sets you up in a way that you're not so rigid that you create stress, which creates more adverse health effects mentally, psychologically, socially. Sometimes I just want to eat something that I know isn't nutritionally the best, but it's not as harmful, nearly as harmful as what causes the condition.
Exactly. So you were touching a bit on your research earlier. So I know you did a lot of research on the subject. What did you find out? Where is science now as opposed to what people know? Did we discover something new about that?
One thing to look at, one thing to emphasize so that people understand kind of maybe the roots of some of the, especially the allergy related problems, is the kind of the evolution of wheat production. So that was something that I spent a lot of time looking into, because I'm somebody who, when I look at an issue, I want to look back and see kind of what's the context of it, what are the foundations of it. And the foundation in the production of wheat is fascinating. A lot of people, if you go to health food stores now, they're selling Eichhorn wheat, which is what do they call it? Not antique, but there's a word. It's just kind of like one of the original untouched, unadulterated wheats. And then in earlier genetic modification, it used to be more a matter of crossbreeding. So you can crossbreed strains of wheat. When you crossbreed strains of wheat, they take on each other's genetics, and it multiplies the genetics, or that adds the genetics together. Whereas, when humans reproduce, the genetics, the number of genes stays the same per person. But in wheat, it actually, they just add on to each other. So what was happening was these farmers were producing wheat that maybe had more of a gluten content, or more qualities that were more conducive to bread that was more appealing to people. And so then you have that situation, but then you also have more modern genetic modification and different techniques that adulterate or change the wheat. And so you have a very common wheat, I think it's called Clearfield wheat. Yes, Clearfield wheat. And that became more predominant in the last few decades. And even though it involves a very toxic chemical to produce this type of wheat, and it's called Clearfield because it's pest resistant, it was never labeled as a GMO wheat. And so it kind of snuck its way into all products that contain wheat. And we have to ask ourselves when we're looking at these modified products, is if they repel these bugs, what do they repel in our system? So there are these very fundamental questions we have to ask about this wheat that's been really modified using chemicals that are so toxic that you're not really allowed in a room without preparatory equipment to handle them. How are these things affecting the foods that we eat, the crackers, the cookies, the pastas, everything that's on your shelf? You can make a reasonable bet that it involves Clearfield wheat, because it's just a very common strain. And it's just a lot easier to keep the pests off for them easier. I don't agree with that, because I think there are other ways, but so these things we really need to be aware of. And then so that's that. What we're starting to understand is that other grains can also contain kind of a glutinous molecule, and so it's good to look into those grains and be aware of those as well. And I think a lot of Italian researchers are on this, because if you look at the Italian diet, it's very, very pasta and very bread heavy. And so if you go to these restaurants, just like you said, in Rome or Florence, you will see a gluten-free menu. But I think the most important thing to be aware of is that these gluten-free products still contain maybe perhaps these glutinous grains. They also contain such a processed version of a flour that the glycemic index on these products is so much higher than even a piece of white bread, or in some cases sometimes it's higher than sugar, which is really profound to think about. So it's really important just to become holistically aware of this food market, because it was deregulated late last century. When it was deregulated, we started eating a lot more food a lot more often. It wasn't like we just had to depend on the seasons and that. It's now we're eating a lot more often. We're eating in a different way, and our bodies are responding and letting us know very clearly that they don't like it. We just have to kind of come back to basics and be like, well, maybe I should just eat 3 times a day and have these intermittent fasting periods, which are healthier for my immune system and my digestive system, and more the way my body is programmed to work. So I think it's just really important I've written about this, and it's on Elephant Journal, the article about the gluten-free. And there are just different things you can read now. It's everywhere. Just educating yourself and just being very, very honest with yourself about what is positively affecting your health and what is deleterious to it. I think just being real honest with yourself is important.
Yeah, information and knowledge are power. We always say that, but it's even more so with food, I think. One of the things that we know for sure is that it takes about 1,000 years for the human body to be able to metabolize a new food. Well, gluten has been around for what, 60 years? That hybrid kind of gluten. We still have like 950, 940 years, to go about to be able to digest that kind of thing. So it's not going to happen today. We're still there to see it. Then everything that they use with those GMO-based products, that glyphosate, one of the arguments that they use to pretend that it's safe for us is that it does not affect any pathways in the human biology. The problem, so we can't conduct it. It does not, it doesn't travel in our body. So therefore it can't affect us. The thing is that it's partially true. It does not. We don't have any pathways to utilize that glyphosate, molecule of it. So it's not affect us, but we're only 10% human. 90% of us, we are bacteria.
Yes.
And those bacteria have the pathways for it.
Right.
So, when you look at it from a human perspective, I say, okay, we don't have the pathways for it, so it won't affect us. Yeah, fine. But since we are just a little tiny bit human, the rest will work with it. And that's some of the research, parallel, alternative research is getting into, is to try to find out how the glyphosate is actually impacting our gut microbiota.
Yes, that's a really, really important thing. I think that this market really depends on people being ignorant of the fact that we are 90% bacteria. And that is a huge, when I was graduating from the University of Wisconsin, they were just setting up one of the biggest, departments of microbiology in the country, and they were mostly focused on studying good bacteria, because what they were saying is, and I did one article on this, and I remember way back then in 2004 hearing that 90% statistic, and my eyes just popped out of my head. I said, what? She said, do you know that you're way more bacteria than you are actually human cells? And I just was like, this is so profound. It's going to take me years to make sense of this in my own life. But she said the problem is that there's always, and rightfully so, there's always been so much focus on negative bacteria, like, what can we say? When they had to develop penicillin against all of these bacterial infections, it makes sense.
Against Bisha. Yeah, absolutely.
But these are like carpet bombs. They bomb all of your bacteria. So we really are looking at your immune system being destroyed from the inside out because you're trying to protect yourself from one bad guy, you end up killing all these good guys. So she said, now we've got this department that's trying to research who are the good guys and how many of them have been destroyed by this medication and how many of them can we do things to help reinforce. It's
Exactly.
really, really interesting.
It's an equilibrium between the bad guys and the good guys. We do need the good guys because too much, if even the good guy wants, can generate and create conditions in our body. So it's like a tango.
Yeah.
Many of them will cause problem, but now there's so many of them that even today research haven't identified everything. They know, we know a few things we tackle, but we don't even. I was yesterday, as a matter of fact, we were sitting with two researchers in Barcelona, and one was in genetic. The wife was in genetic. He was in microbiology, and we're talking about the fact that we don't have today the tools to analyze all that. Everybody agrees on the fact that the key is somewhere along, the relation between the microbiome, the genetic, the gene mutation and enzyme or no enzyme. So it's somewhere along that, but there's so many possibilities and we don't have the tools to really read all this. So, but someday we'll find the solution to that. But it's really easy to understand that if we're 90% bacteria, anything that we're going to do that's going to affect the digestive system, since it's a lot of it is there, it's going to affect our being, bacteria or human part, it doesn't matter. But there are a lot of things are being done at that level, and I'm really happy to say that. There's one thing to finish our little talk here that I'd like you to tell me. What could we say to people when they believe, because there's still some people like that, when they believe that going gluten-free is just a fad, that, and like when you say, I can't eat gluten, it's like a taboo word, kind of, because there's still that. There's a lot more understanding and tolerance now, that's true. But in certain part of the world, there's still a lot of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge. So how can we explain that? To help people navigate to that.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to ask yourself, can this person be helped to navigate it, or are they really closed off? And I've just learned over the course of my life, not only in this subject, but in other subjects, that you can either ask directly or you can kind of get a sense of where people are coming from. I've had people tell me in the Ayurvedic community that if I just put a lot of ghee on my chapati, then I can cure myself of this. And I'm just like, no, I'm not interested in eating a bunch of chapati with ghee on it to see if I can have a huge inflammatory response and, shut my immune system down. But I didn't say that. I just say, okay, that's interesting. Thanks. And I think it just depends on whether or not the person might be open to your explanation. And especially people who are close to you, you should hope that they are. Because, if you're spending every day with this person, you don't want to be, struggling to explain this to them every single time. I think, they can just trust that your body, that you've done the research, that you've experienced this. For most of us, it was a little bit of a living hell to go through. And so I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it's really important to make that decision very early on, that you're your own advocate, and get really comfortable with that, because your response will immediately, the first years for me, sometimes it was a defensive response, like, no, I can't eat this, and that doesn't help at all with people, because then they're just like, well, does she even, why is she so emotional about this? So now for me, it's just kind of like it's just the way that I say it. People don't really challenge me anymore, because it's just very matter of fact, and I'm very like, no, I can't eat that, or thank you very much, but I'm unable to eat that, or just starting off with no thank you. You know what I mean?
I was about to say. Yeah.
No thank you. I don't need to tell you what I have, that I can't eat it, that I don't, you get, first of all, it's tiring. Second of all, it's boring, and of course I've been in a lot of different cultural situations, and those are the most difficult, where it's like, when I lived in the Middle East, it's like, oh, here's our, this is a very famous kachori dish that's full of, it's full of wheat and full of other things. And it's like, oh, that looks so delicious. And then just passing on it, people, especially if you're in a group situation, a lot of times people, unless they're the ones serving you, aren't even paying attention to what you're eating. So I just assume that, and I just eat things in that. And I don't eat meat except for fish. So that can also be a double whammy to these people who are really like sitting around eating lamb and all this like stuff. And I'm just like, no. And I just show that I'm happy and I'm healthy. And I think that's a really huge statement, just to be like happy, content, enjoying the food that you're eating, and not being like, because people worry and they care about you. And I think it's really important also to tell yourself, these people care about me. They want me to be healthy. Exactly. And they want me to share the food with them, and they want to share the experience of eating. So yeah, I think and you can also, people close to you, for me, I cook gluten-free. So then I cook things, and it's really it's delicious for people. And they're like, we really don't even need that much anymore. And it's questionable whether that's very beneficial to anybody in quantity. So, that's kind of how I handle it. It's really, it's in your own mind. And I mean, I'm really a big proponent of things that are very energetic. So if you walk in a room and and you're just calm and you just say, people are just like, oh, well, she knows, and they might even be curious themselves. I wonder what that's all about, instead of, defensive and having to tell a story and this and that. It doesn't get you very far. I've experienced
the situation I get quite often right now, because fair enough, people know about it, and it's not like before, but the situation I get into is that quite often, I shouldn't eat gluten either, but I can't. So it starts, it opens the door, something that I don't even go there anymore, because just like, that's an information there's no point saying,
Mm-hmm.
So but I kind of agree with you. Now I'm at the point where I say no thank you, and I don't even say why. And it's quite enough. All my friends and everybody knows, so they come to me and say, okay, we're gonna have barbecue, what can I get you that is special, or can you come with, so that's the kind of thing that I do. But when it's a social, then I do a lot of networking events, and there's always food involved. So, and sometimes people are very insisting, on you getting some food. So I just take the plate, and then I travel around in the room, whatever, and I put the plate down. I know it's like wasting food, but sometimes it's a lot easier to do that for me than just explain, no, I can't. And because, even if they're very nice about it, they feel bad that they didn't even think.
Yes, they do.
So I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to have to expand my entire life either. And so I just, sometimes when I'm just like taking the plate and just putting it, aside, and nobody knows, like you said, nobody even see, if you actually ate or not. So that's a little trick, that I learned to do to avoid the situation where I have to justify. And I am at the point where I'm tired of having to justify. For me, it's for my son. So I just like, when I hear, you're gluten-free family, you got into that diet, right? So I just like, I don't go there, I don't react anymore, because that's the only part I can control is my reaction. So now I stop reacting to this. I don't try to explain, no, we have a valid reason. No, I don't go there. I just let them say when I hear this kind of comment, I just, dismiss them. It's the easiest way. I mean, you know what you're doing, and you do it because you want to be healthy, and that is your own responsibility. It's nobody else's, and it's not the business of anybody else. So I just leave it there. And if you feel that it's like I'm following a fad idea, well, that's the belief, not mine. And the moment I was able to do that, I didn't feel uncomfortable going out. It didn't feel like a burden to when you go out and you don't know what you're going to eat. Sometimes I have a few crackers in my bag, especially for my son, if there's really nothing, so I put something and I take them very discreetly. So there are different things that, it's always possible to do, or I eat before I go.
That's a big one. That's a really good strategy, to eat before you go, or just to take a little tiny nutrition bar or something you can sneak in the bathroom if you need it. But you might even realize that you're not even as hungry as you. One thing I've started to realize because of this is that I'm not that. I don't need that much food.
Exactly. And so it's really a change, a life change, lifestyle change. It's not just a diet. It's really everything has to be changed, and the way we see things and the way we live through it. So it's not a drama.
Yeah.
Well, Emily, that was a great conversation. We learned a lot. I hope that people who are listening or will be listening to the recording will get feel better about their condition, and we'll have a few bits of knowledge and bits of wisdom that they'll be able to apply in your life. You did share a lot. And can you remind me, and for everybody, your website and how we can get in touch with you?
Sure. My website is my name, so it's emilyalp.com. I've also written articles that, through a Google search, you can just find them on healthy fats, different gluten, different things. But yeah, my website's the best way because you can email me through the website, and you can read my health blog, and I have a newsletter too. You can sign up through that as well. So
Wonderful.
And I'm always happy to hear from people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Emily, for your time.
Thanks.
And I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you.
And just
Thank you, Christina.